Alright lads, welcome back to the channel. If you've been struggling playing top tier ground, and you don't really know how to take out all of the new tanks that have been added recently, then this video's for you. I'm going to be using the Leopard 2A7's DM53, as well as the 30F26 HE round, to show you all of the weak spots of all the modern top tier War Thunder tanks. While these two rounds are the strongest in their representative categories, every weak spot I will be showing can still be penetrated by even the weaker rounds in War Thunder. But before we get on to the video lads, this video has been sponsored by GE for War Thunder. GE for War Thunder is a long-term sponsor of this channel. Their app can be downloaded from the Google Play Store, and you complete various simple tasks in exchange for small amounts of golden eagles, mainly answering surveys and watching ads for other apps. I personally use this app in between games or whilst I'm side climbing. You aren't going to win enough to buy a top tier premium, we can easily unlock a few modifications to make a stock grind easier, or purchase a day of premium if you have a free Saturday. Download the app from the link in the description, and use my code for some extra free golden eagles. Thanks again to GE for War Thunder for sponsoring this video. One of the biggest paper tigers at top tier is the M1A2 Abrams. It has a crew of 4 men, with 3 in the turret and a single driver in the hull. The front of the hull and the whole turret are covered in composite armour, giving it great protection from chemical warheads. At the time of recording, no Abrams variant has a spall liner modelled in-game, meaning you can be a little sloppy with your shot placement and still cause huge amounts of damage with a single round. All of the Abrams from the M1 all the way to the M1A2 SEP V2 basically have the exact same weak spots. If you have a top tier round, the lower frontal plate is incredibly weak, allowing you to penetrate here and doing quite a lot of damage. But the Abrams doesn't house any ammunition on the floor of the tank, so shooting the lower frontal plate of an Abrams is likely to only kill the driver and maybe knock out the engine, leaving him free to return fire. The Abrams also has 2 fuel tanks either side of the driver, which provides extra protection against spalling. Instead, players should try to knock out the firepower first when facing an Abrams. Ideally, you want to be shooting the tank here, in the left hand side of the gun breech. This will at least knock out the gun, and if you have a high pen, high spall round, the spall should at least knock out the gunner and commander as well. In general though, the entire turret ring and gun manlet on the Abrams is a weak spot. Regardless of how strong the cheeks and lower frontal plate are, you should always aim for the gun breech when facing this tank. From the side, the Abrams is quite hard to kill in a single hit, due to how far apart the crew are in the turret. Compared to the Leopard, whose crew are packed in like sardines, the Abrams is actually quite roomy. For the best chance of a one-hit kill from the side, I'd recommend shooting the tank here, in a little triangle formed by the hull slightly rising. Shooting here, even with weak rounds, will almost certainly always kill all 3 crew members in the turret, knocking the tank out in a single hit. Another general rule is to shoot the turret in line with the edge of the commander's cupola. As you can see, no matter the angle, shooting here will also kill the turret members. Due to the ammunition of the Abrams being stored in blow-up panels in the bustle, there is no point trying to ammo rack the Abrams from the side, as the ammunition will burn without causing any damage internally to the crew. For players using a high explosive round, the roof of the Abrams is a dream. It's incredibly cluttered with weapon stations and optics, making it very easy to overpressure the Abrams with a HE round. Even average power HE rounds, like the one found on the Leopard 2A7, can still kill the Abrams if a hit to the commander's cupola. But for high power HE like the 30F26 or a Vidar round, the Abrams thermal imager, gunner sight, and the driver's ports are all viable targets. The M1A2 Abrams is a tank that very few people play correctly. It should be played more like a Challenger 2, slow and steady, but American mains always seem to push, thinking they're in T80B VMs. They then get themselves killed and then go and complain on the forums. Abrams players should instead use their good mobility to get to a strong initial position, and then wait for enemies to come to them. The Leopard 2A7 has a crew of 4 men, with 3 in the turret and 1 in the hull. The hull of the Leopard is pretty well protected with its composite armour block. This armoured block is thickest around the headlights of the tank. Below the headlights is still protected, but it is likely an easy penetration. Even DM23 fired from a 105 can easily penetrate the lower plate. While this is a weakness of the Leopard tanks, there isn't really anything critical in this area, other than the driver's balls I guess. The much more vital weak spot of a Leo's hull is the upper frontal plate. While this is technically a weakness, it will almost certainly bounce any incoming round, due to its extreme angling, So I'd only recommend shooting here if you are using a super high pen round or the Leopard is driving downhill, presenting you a flatter target. This is due to most Sabre rounds bouncing after any angle over 78 degrees, and the Leopard 2's upper frontal plate is sloped at around 80 degrees. The M53 can still go through the driver's port, for example, but most lower tier APF-SDS rounds will just automatically bounce here. If you are going to shoot the upper frontal plate, it is best to shoot the left hand side of the vehicle, just at the driver's port. As you can see, a penetrating round here on the left hand side can kill the driver, gunner and commander in a single hit. While the Leopard 2A7 does have an ammunition stockpile on the right hand side of the hull, it is unlikely that an experienced player is going to be carrying any more than 16 rounds into a battle. So I would always shoot the left hand side of the hull rather than the right hand side. For the turret, the cheeks of the Leopard 2A7 and all Leopard variants are pretty much off limits for APF-SDS, as none are strong enough to go through. As with most tanks, the natural weak spot is the gun breach. While the Leopard 2A5 and all subsequent Leopard variants do have enhanced turret protection, the area just below the gun is unarmoured, and this is where to shoot a Leopard if you are unsure about going through the hull. Even DM23 can go straight through here, knocking out the gun and creating a minimal spalling. So against a much more powerful round like DM53, you create a lot more spalling, almost certainly killing all 3 crew members in the turret. Frontally, at top tier, the best way to knock out any Leopard 2 is to hit it right here below the gun and slightly to the left. While all the Leopard 2s have a turret roof spall liner, only the Leopard 2A7 has a hull spall liner. This means side aspect shots against a Leopard can be quite tricky. My easy tip is to shoot the Leopard side between the 3rd and 4th road wheel. This area contains all the crew members in the turret, again leading to an easy one-shot kill. Against a Leopard angled at about a 45 degree, shoot between the 1st and 2nd wheels. For chemical munitions, the Leopard is a little bit strange. Despite having a spall liner mounted in the turret roof, a well-placed high explosive round will still overpressure the crew inside. High explosive rounds can also be fired at the turret ring, again leading to an easy overpressure kill. But most strange of all are the 2 frontal shock zones. Shooting here with a high explosive round will transfer the energy into the hull and also kill the crew somehow. The spall liners and the fantastic turret side armor makes the Leopard 2A7 incredibly hard to kill from around a 45 degree angle. Frontally, the upper frontal plate is a theoretical weak spot, but most of the time your round will likely bounce. Instead, shoot the Leopard 2A7 and all Leopard 2 variants just below the gun breach and send them back to Agartha. All of the Soviet main battle tanks in game are essentially up and side grades of each other, and all share the same basic principle: a short tank with an autoloader system mounted under the turret. Due to the design similarities, all of the Soviet main battle tanks have the exact same weaknesses. I will be using the T90M for demonstration here, but the same shot placement applies to pretty much every other Soviet tank. The T90M is by far the hardest Russian tank to kill, mainly through the addition of several spall liners, which cover the front, sides and roof of the tank. The front of all Soviet tanks are plastered in both ERA and composite armor. The earlier tanks like the T-72As and Bs use Contact 1 and Contact 5, whereas the more modern MBTs such as the BVM and T90M use integrated Relict ERA, which offers significantly better coverage and protection. The frontal composite armor of all tanks that come after the T-72A is generally strong enough to counter DM53 alone, so targeting weak spots is necessary. With the exception of the T-80U, all Russian main battle tanks have no protection on the lower glacis, making this a natural weak spot. This is the preferred place to shoot pretty much every Russian vehicle, as the ammunition carousel of the autoloader is also located on the floor of the hull, meaning a shot penetrating the lower frontal plate will usually also detonate the ammunition. The other frontal weak spot is the driver's port. On the T90M, the armor of the upper frontal plate gives you around 1000mm of protection, but as you can see, the driver's port offers less than 200. Just be aware that you need to shoot the driver's port window in order to knock the tank out in a single hit. Shots lower than the vision port will instead only knock out the driver and the engine, allowing the tank to return fire at you. The gun breach and turret ring is also a weak spot, but it's very hard to kill the T90M by shooting it here. A shot here will usually either destroy the gun breach or the turret ring, but I still think it is better to shoot it in the driver's port or the lower frontal plate. In general though, the turret cheeks of the upper and frontal plate is completely immune to DM53, even at point blank range. Other than these 3 weak spots, the armor of the T-90M is very good. Bear in mind that compared to large NATO tanks, the weak spots of Soviet main battle tanks are pretty hard to hit, especially when said tanks are hull down and behind cover. From the side, the T-90M is very easy to penetrate, but quite hard to kill in a single hit. Again, due to the spall liner. This is the only real difference between the T-90M and every other Russian main battle tank. Against something like a T-80U, shooting it in the side of the hull to detonate the ammunition is a basic tactic, but due to the spall liner in the T-90M, my no bullshit advice is to shoot the turret side instead of the hull side. Shooting the T-90M here avoids most of the ERA and creates a lot more spalling, usually killing it in a single hit. Against high explosive rounds, the Russian 305-26 is basically useless against the T-90M's roof, and considering all NATO high explosive rounds are significantly weaker than the Russian, the T-90M's roof is basically immune from high explosive rounds. The 305-26 can still be used to kill the T-90M if you shoot it in the driver's port, but again this is a pretty small target for a relatively slow moving high explosive round. The recently added Object 292's 152mm high explosive round, however, can penetrate the roof of the T-90M, but of course you usually aren't going to be facing this in a battle, as you will likely be on the same team. Overall, the Russian main battle tanks are pretty tanky, at least from the front. Most of them can be easily knocked out from a single shot into the side, specifically targeting just above the ammo rack. The T-90M is slightly different, again at least from the side, as you need to aim higher at the turret. Regardless of the new spall liners added to the T-90M, it still retains the exact same weaknesses as every other Soviet main battle tank. So if you know how to quickly kill a T-72B, you know how to kill the T-90M. Just like the Soviets, all of the British top tier main battle tanks are essentially just minor upgrades over one another. They all share the same weak spots. The only tank of note is the Black Knight, which utilizes an active protection system. This will hard kill any incoming chemical round and significantly degrades the penetrative power of any incoming Sabre round. The active protection system on the Black Knight is effective against projectiles moving slower than 1,700 meters per second. This means the tank is significantly protected against M829A2 fired by the Americans, 3BM60 fired by the Soviets, L27A1 fired by other British vehicles, DM53 fired by Italian tanks, and M338 fired by the Merkavas. But the main gun rounds fired by the German, Japanese, Chinese, French and Swedish guns travel faster than 1700 meters per second, meaning they will not be affected by the active protection system. All of the Challenger 2 tanks get a full spall liner in the turret front and sides, as well as a spall liner located directly behind the hull composite armour, but the sides of the hull remain unprotected. The frontal armour profile of the British MBTs is very questionable. First of all, the lower frontal plate is completely unprotected, at the point that even Sherman guns from World War II can penetrate it. This is mainly a problem for the base Challenger 2s, Challenger 2E, Black Knight, and the Challenger 3. The Challenger 2F has some Remor ERA on the lower plate, which provides 30mm of kinetic protection and 350mm of chemical protection. The Challenger 2 TES further improves the lower frontal plate protection, as an add-on composite armor block is in place, which gives you around 200mm of additional protection against DM23, but it is next to useless against DM53. The composite armor of all the Challenger 2s is thick and offers very good protection. The problem is that the coverage is pretty bad, most notably the huge hull the size of Lake Superior, also known as the driver's port. Against DM53, the driver's port only provides around 100mm of protection, and as you can see, a high-powered Sabre round fired here will usually knock out 3 of the 4 crew members, killing you instantly. It is one of the few NATO MBTs that can be killed easily in a single hit to the front. The turret armor isn't really any better. While again it does provide good protection, the gun breech takes up a huge amount of the turret's frontal profile and can be easily penetrated by DM53, even out to ranges exceeding 1500 meters. The roof of the Challenger 2s is also incredibly weak. If you are using DM53 or another high power Sabre round, a well placed shot against the commander's vision system can easily lead to the deaths of the gunner and commander, completely destroying the tank's ability to return fire. From the side, the easiest way to knock out this tank is to locate the third road wheel and then aim at the upper part of the hull, just past this wheel. A shot here will almost certainly knock out all 3 crew members in the turret. Despite every top tier round being easily capable of penetrating the turret sides of the Challenger 2s, I wouldn't recommend shooting it here, as the spall liner will significantly reduce the internal damage you cause. Against high explosive rounds, the Challenger 2's hull is pretty much immune. You can't sling a HE round at the driver's port like you can on some of the Leopards or an Abrams, but the roof is still incredibly vulnerable. The loader's MG port, the commander's optic, and the commander's cupola are all easy targets, which will kill the tank instantly if hit with the 3OF26 round. Overall, the Challenger 2 is the weakest tank we've looked at so far. It's also the slowest, and the firepower isn't particularly great either, so I'm sure you can see why so few people actually play Britain at top tier. The top tier Japanese main battle tanks are incredibly underappreciated bits of kit in War Thunder, but not due to their armour or survivability. Instead, it is their fantastic mobility and firepower that make these tanks fantastic to play. Neither the Type 10 or TKX features a spall liner, and they both barely even have composite armour for that fact. At least they don't have a huge hole in the front like the Challenger 2s though. From the front, we have a small composite strip located on the upper frontal plate. This is thick enough to stop DM53 at point blank range, but it obviously doesn't cover a huge part of the tank. Also, the lower frontal plate is completely unprotected. Shooting the right hand side of the lower frontal plate is a great way to one-shot both the Type 10 and the TKX, as the round will pass through the driver and gunner, knocking out 2 of the 3 crew members. Shooting the left hand side of the tank can also trigger hitting the ammo rack, located to the left of the driver. Both the Type 10 and TKX have an ammo rack in the rear of the turret, which holds 14 rounds of ammunition. Most people are probably going to take 1 or 2 rounds in the hull ammo rack, so a shot to the left side can still cause catastrophic damage, but shooting the right hand side is generally more reliable. Moving up to the turret, and again we have some composite armour, but just like the Challenger 2, the gun breach is huge, leaving it incredibly vulnerable to even early Sable rounds. A shot into the gun breach will likely knock out the gun, and only 1 crew member, leaving the tank free to retreat and return fire. The much better place to shoot these tanks is the raised bit of the hull, located near the turret ring. Another place you can shoot for pretty consistent kills is to shoot the driver's vision port. Unlike every other tank we've covered so far, the Japanese main battle tanks do not have any sort of composite armour on their sides, leaving them very vulnerable to even infantry fighting vehicles, and those sneaky M22 locusts that love to hide around corners. When shooting the side of these tanks, it is best to just look for the roof mounted 50 cal and just shoot the turret below. This is basically the exact location of the gunner and commander, again killing 2 of the 3 enemies in a single hit. Against high explosive rounds, the Type 10 is the weakest tank yet. As you can see, it is vulnerable to high explosive at the lower frontal plate, the turret ring, and both the commander's cupola and the gunner's sight. Overall, the Type 10 and the TKX are not known as tanky main battle tanks. They were designed to be light, to navigate Japan's hilly terrain, and to be easily moved between the many islands. The ZTZ-99A, WZ-1001, and the VT-4A1 are the top tier Chinese main battle tanks, all of which were pretty much based off the Soviet T-72. None of these tanks have any sort of spall liners. They don't even have spall liners behind the frontal composite armour, leaving them very vulnerable to high power SAKO, which can easily penetrate the thinner parts of their armour and create massive amounts of spalling. Like most of the Soviet tanks, we have pretty strong frontal armour, with composite blocks placed behind the upper frontal plate and the turret cheeks. But again, the lower frontal plate is completely unprotected. I'd recommend either shooting the left or the right hand side of the plate, as this will knock out the driver as well as the gunner or commander. Shooting directly in the middle of the lower frontal plate will only kill the driver. Like a lot of other Soviet style tanks, a shot to the lower frontal plate can also detonate the ammunition rack, again killing the tank instantly. All of the top Chinese tanks are also plastered in ERA, specifically the domestically designed Chinese FY4. On the hull mounted variant, it provides 180mm of protection from kinetic weapons and 550 against chemical weapons. The ERA in its turret mounted form is a bit stronger, providing 250mm of protection against SAKO and 600mm against chemical warheads. It's also worth pointing out that the VT-41A has an active protection system similar to that found on the Black Knight, but this APS is only effective against rounds moving slower than 1400 meters per second, meaning the vast majority of SAKO rounds will not be intercepted by this system. As you can see, against DM53, The upper frontal plate is basically immune at point blank range, with the most obvious weak spot, other than the lower frontal plate, being the driver's port. Shooting here, as you can see, will usually create massive amounts of spalling, killing all 3 crew members, as well as knocking out the cannon. Alternatively, you can shoot at the gun breech itself, but I found this to be less efficient, as it usually only knocks out the gun, with most of the spalling missing the gunner or commander. So frontally, shooting either the lower frontal plate or the driver's port is the go-to method of knocking out all 3 of the top tier Chinese main battle tanks. From the side, the lack of a spall liner makes killing these tanks pretty easy. Throw in the fact that these Chinese tanks use basically the same autoloader as the T-72, and a side aspect shot on one of these tanks is very easy to kill. From the side, you want to aim between the 3rd and the 4th road wheel. It doesn't matter if you aim low or high, as shooting low will detonate the ammo rack, and shooting high will kill the commander and the gunner. Against high explosive rounds, the Chinese tanks are pretty vulnerable. The turret ring is pretty massive, and a HE round here will overpressure all the crew members. Another point of weakness is the gunner sight, located on the right hand side of the turret, as well as the commander's sight located on the left hand side. Overall, the Chinese main battle tanks are very vulnerable from all angles. They were a hybrid design of using an unlengthened T-72 hull, but with a Western style engine, giving them far better mobility than the Soviet counterparts, but much worse survivability. Doing a guide on how to kill the Italian Arietes is almost pointless. They are by far the weakest top tier main battle tanks in the game, as Gaijin seemingly has a hate boner for the Arietes, seeing as they get nerf after nerf. None of the Arietes get any sort of spall liner, making them incredibly vulnerable to spall damage. Unlike all of the other tanks we have covered so far, which were mainly protected by composite armor, the Ariete largely relies on spaced armor, with only the turret cheeks having some sort of composite armor protection. And as you can see, this provides basically no protection against any modern ammunition, even at over 2000 meters. The DM53 can go through every part of this tank's armor, including the turret cheeks and the upper frontal plate. In order to kill this tank quickly, just shoot the left hand side of the vehicle. This will kill the driver, gunner and commander in a single hit. The Ariete also has no safe ammunition storage, with the 15 round ready rack just being located by the loader's feet on the right hand side of the vehicle. This means if you shoot the left hand side of the tank, you will kill the crew, and if you shoot the right hand side, you will detonate the ammunition. For some reason though, against high explosive, the tank is pretty protected, mainly due to the lack of turret mounted stuff. The commander sight is still vulnerable on the left hand side of the turret top, as well as a strange little area above the driver's port. With the Ariete being so weak to conventional saber rounds, you really shouldn't have any sort of issue trying to deal with this tank. It isn't good at close range brawling, and its complete lack of turret armor and a mediocre long range cannon makes it also pretty bad in long range sniping engagements. And now you know why no one wants to play top tier Italy. The Lerclerc is the main battle tank of the French army. Like the Soviet and Japanese tanks, the Lerclerc has a crew of 3 men, with a driver in the hull and a gunner and commander located in the turret. The Lerclerc is a very strange design, with the turret looking more like an expressionism painting rather than a piece of modern military equipment. But French boying aside, the Lerclerc is similar to the Italian Ariete, due to the fact it basically has no real armor protection against the modern saber rounds being fired at it. First of all, the lower plate has no armor whatsoever, making it very easy to knock this tank out in a single hit from the front. The driver of the Lerclerc is located on the right hand side of the vehicle, sitting in front of the commander, so shooting the right hand side of the lower plate is the fastest way of killing this tank. While the Lerclerc does have a hull ammunition store, this will almost certainly be empty. The turret bustle ready rack consists of 22 rounds, which is more than enough for a game of War Thunder. So shooting the left hand side of the Leclerc's hull is nowhere near as effective as shooting the right hand side. Moving upwards to the upper frontal plate, and the armor protection here is no better. Generally, most top tier APF SDS rounds will only bounce on angles exceeding 78 degrees. The Leclerc's frontal armor is only angled at around 76 degrees, meaning every saber round is likely to penetrate if hit here, and as you can see from the armor viewer, even at a range of 2000 meters, the DM33 can penetrate the upper frontal plate, never mind DM53 or 3BM60. Again, shoot the right hand side of the upper frontal plate to kill the driver and the commander, killing the tank in a single hit. You can also shoot the driver's port vision slots, but I found this to be quite trolly and inconsistent. The one place you definitely shouldn't shoot the Lerclerc is the turret. The commander is protected by a thick piece of composite armor, but the M53 is still able to penetrate it. The reason you shouldn't shoot the turret is there is not really any chance of knocking out the tank in a single hit. If you shoot to the right of the gun breach, you will just kill the commander, and if you shoot to the left, you will usually only kill the gunner, allowing the tank to retreat and repair. From the side though, you want to acquire the third road wheel and shoot just above it. This will hit the commander and the gunner, again knocking out the tank in a single hit. The armor of the Lerclerc is actually pretty deceptive. The best place to shoot it is actually the highly angled upper frontal plate or the lower frontal plate, rather than the traditional weak spot of a gun breech. Against high explosive rounds, the tank doesn't fare really much better. A shot to the driver's port will easily knock out the tank, and you can also target both the commander and gunner's hatches, which will also overpressure the vehicle. Overall, the Lerclerc is a very easy tank to kill. Like the Japanese MBTs, the Lerclerc is carried by its gun mobility and high resolution thermals. If you do come up against a French main battle tank, don't be scared to shoot it in the highly angled upper plate. After covering the last couple of tanks which haven't exactly been hard to kill, we now turn our attention to probably the most survivable tanks in War Thunder, the Strv 122s. All of the A and B models come with both hull and turret spall liners as standard, giving them fantastic survivability from all angles, which the German mains are still seething about. Frontally, the Strv 122s are basically just Leopard 2 hulls with additional spall liners, with no major differences between the composite armor coverage. Again, the lower frontal plate is a big weak spot, allowing you to easily knock out the driver and gunner, while this will allow the commander to return fire at you. Like the other Leopard 2 tanks, there is an ammunition stored in the right hand side of the hull, in front of the loader, but most Leopard players will not be taking more than 16 rounds into a battle to begin with, so shooting here is largely redundant. Just shoot at the left hand side of the vehicle. There's also another weak spot, the driver's port. This is a little sketchy as the armor here is highly angled at around 80 degrees, meaning top tier sabres are likely to bounce. A shot to the driver's port, however, is likely to knock out the driver, gunner and commander in a single hit. Just bear in mind this is a very small target, even at close range, but it is the only reliable way to knock out an Strv-22 in a single hit. As you can see, against DM53, at point blank range, the majority of the Strv-122s are completely immune. Only the lower frontal plate and the gun breech are a major weakness. Which brings us onto the other place you can shoot the Strv, the gun breech. This will of course knock out the gun, but it won't prevent the tank from retreating. Shooting the very left of the gun breech can knock out the loader, commander and gunner, while like the driver's port it is a very small target, and quite trolly. Just shooting directly underneath the gun usually will only kill the commander and the loader, as well as the gun itself. From the side you want to aim in between the third and fourth road wheels. A shot here will knock out all members of the crew in the turret, but due to the composite armor of the Strv-122s wrapping around the side of the turret, it is far better to shoot the hull rather than the turret sides. Frontally against high explosive rounds, you are much better shooting the Strvs in the driver's port rather than aiming for the roof. Not only is the driver's port the largest HE weak spot, but it is also at a much shallower angle than the roof, which can prevent the HE rounds from bouncing. Overall, the Strv-122s are by far the hardest tanks to kill in War Thunder. They combine fantastic armor thickness, good coverage, and full spall liners, making it very hard to penetrate and produce spalling. The Merkava is one of the most intimidating tanks in War Thunder. It just looks scary, but it isn't particularly well armoured. Instead, it has a frontally mounted engine designed to eat up any shrapnel. This makes it quite hard to kill the Merkava in a single hit, especially from the front. Like quite a few other tanks, none of the Merkavas have any sort of spall liner present. Instead, along with the front-mounted engine, the Merkava has plenty of internal separation, with thin amounts of metal armour. This isn't going to stop sabre rounds from penetrating, but it should stop the spalling. Like the Black Knight and VT-4A1, the Merkava Mk also has an active protection system. This is only effective against projectiles moving slower than 1000 meters per second, which makes it only really effective against high explosive rounds as well as ATGMs. Even heater fest rounds at top tier are travelling faster than 1000 meters per second. The crew layout of the Merkava also aids its survivability. with the driver and loader located on the far right hand side of the vehicle, and the gunner and commander located on the far left. Because of this, it's incredibly hard to knock out 3 of the 4 crew members in a single hit. The Merkava's lower frontal plate does not get any composite armor, but it does have a thin armor plate which also has external fuel tanks mounted on it. This doesn't really offer any protection against modern SAKO, and the additional engine in the way basically just creates more spalling. There is nowhere to shoot the lower plate in order to knock out the tank in a single hit. There is also no way of predicting what damage will be caused by shooting the lower frontal plate, as the SAKO just kind of bounces around off everything. The upper frontal plate is covered in an externally mounted composite armor, which is predominantly there for protection against shoulder-launched anti-tank weapons, such as the RPG. It's not really intended for tank-on-tank conflict, and just like the lower plate, the upper frontal plate is basically an easy low pen for any top-tier round. Just like the lower plate, shooting the upper plate is largely redundant, as it is very hard to knock out the tank in a single hit here. If you have a habit of rushing shots though, make sure that you shoot the left-hand side of the upper plate, as this will at least knock out both the gunner and commander, preventing him from returning fire at you. By far the best place to shoot a Merkava though, is just below the gun breech. This creates enough spalling to knock out the gunner, commander and loader, and this is the only consistent way to kill a Merkava in a single hit. However, it's an insanely small target at anything other than point blank range, and of course the Merkava will be having to point his gun directly at you, which can unfortunately lead to you being shot. So you are probably better trying to knock out the tank's gun first going for the gun breech, and then trying to finish off the crew members. If we take a look at the armor viewer, we can see that DM53 basically can low pen this entire tank, but the majority of the places to shoot will only knock out 2 of the 4 crew members. From the side, we're going to want to identify the 4th road wheel, and then shoot the hull just above it. A shot there should take out everyone inside the turret. It's simple as that. I wouldn't even bother trying to shoot the turret, as it does receive composite armor, so shooting the relatively weaker hull is by far a better option. Against high explosive rounds, the Merkavas are remarkably resilient. While you can penetrate the turret wing of high explosive, this will not cause any damage to crew members, instead just destroying the barrel. Instead, you can shoot at the driver's hatch, which is vulnerable and will overpressure the crew. Overall, the Merkava isn't a particularly strong vehicle, it's just very annoying to kill. Unlike many other vehicles which have definite weak spots, the Merkava is very trolly and loves to eat incoming SAKO rounds. Anyway lads, that's it, that's all we're going to be covering today, so thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, consider becoming a member by pressing the join button. Check out the Discord server where I frequently squad up with my members and friends, and don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Thanks again for watching lads, and I'll see you in the next video.